And we are back with another Cannabis Thought Leaders podcast. I am your host, Abe Cohn with THC Legal Group, and today we have Kyle with us. Kyle, how are you?
I'm great, Abe. How are you?
Great, great. Okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get involved in this business? What do you do? Let us get to know you a little bit better.
Okay, sure. So back in the 1990s, I was a police officer in for a large city in Los Angeles County out here in California.
Uh-huh.
And so nighttime, I would patrol and I would make a lot of drug arrests, hooked and booked. And then during the daytime, I was running real estate funds and growing that business, which is why I ended up leaving the police department to go full-time into fund management. And then, some years later, about 8-9 years ago, I joined up with a group called Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, LEAP, LEAP.cc, if anybody's curious. And basically, it's a bunch of police officers or ex-police officers, district attorneys and judges who believe the drug war is wrong-headed and speak out about it and discuss it in an intelligent way.
Uh-huh.
And so as different, I'd speak to the ACLU and I'd speak to the libertarians. Everybody wanted to talk about drug legalization, but when Proposition 19 came several years ago, which would have made California the first recreational legal state in the country, it thrust all of us LEAP members, which there aren't too many, out here into the media spotlight. So I was on CNN. I got a very public profile. I became very Googleable. And I had opportunities to enter the space as an investor, which is kind of my bailiwick, finding interesting opportunities and putting some money to work. But I just felt it wasn't the right time.
Uh-huh.
I felt that it was too risky where you could end up in jail. And then roll the clock forward. Colorado, Washington, they pass recreational. I visit Denver many times and I see, wow, this is very interesting. And I see California come with Prop 64, which just passed. And Prop 64 will legalize recreational as of January 1st, 2018. So last year, I knew this was going to pass. I'm still dialed in well politically in the state of California. And I felt differently about investing in 2016 than I did in 2009 and 2010.
Right.
And so I raised a fund, and we basically made some loans, bought some real estate, and helping young entrepreneurs who have gotten licenses or are in the process of getting licenses to access to capital so they could go ahead and build their businesses.
Wow. Well, so there's a lot to unpack there. I think one of the more interesting things that you mentioned, I would say probably controversial amongst certain circles, is kind of your involvement as a police officer. So there does seem to be something difficult, I could imagine at least, if you're a police officer who's tasked with enforcing a law that you don't believe is ethical or even reasonable. What was that experience like, making drug arrests and otherwise putting people away for something that you think maybe was a law that should never have been put in place to begin with?
So that's a great question. And what I would say is, even though I've been a registered libertarian since I was 18, I became a police officer at 27, and I had that bent, but I also wanted to be an effective police officer who vigorously enforced the law. And the laws in California were clear. And then over time, as I saw what happened and how I would just describe it as a big game, and I got to know a lot of these folks that I was taking to jail, and the evolution happened towards the end of my career where I just said, this is a complete waste of time and a complete waste of money. And so I retired in 1999 after 5 years and went about building my business. And only when someone introduced me to LEAP and they said, what are your thoughts on drug war? And I said, it's silly. And they said, have you ever seen statistics? And I said, not really well compiled. And when they showed me the statistics, being kind of a numbers wonk in my other business, I looked at it and I go, my God, the drug war, by any measure, is an absolute failure.
So,
Yeah.
Well, many advocates, many policymakers in this space are also very careful to kind of distinguish marijuana specifically from some of the other drugs. So when you speak of the drug war and when LEAP campaigns against it, are you also speaking only about cannabis, or do you feel that the drug war in its entirety, as it also covers some of the other more dangerous drugs, how do you feel about that?
So I do feel that cannabis is less dangerous, but I speak about it in its entirety. And I'll say this, and I won't go too deeply into this, but I will say this. There is not one prison or jail in the United States that has won the drug war. Not one. Even supermaxes where people are locked down 23 hours a day in their own little room, have we won the drug war and made a drug-free environment. So if we can't do it when somebody is literally locked down by themselves, why do we think we can do it in society? And if we come to the realization that we can't, let's look at the numbers and let's realize it. And I'll give you the brief numbers. Basically, we've spent over $1 trillion since 1971 when we declared the war on drugs. Addiction rates are the exact same. Real prices of these dangerous illicit drugs is lower. They're more powerful. And now we are the most jailing people, United States, on the planet. So we spend an inordinate amount of our budgets putting people in jail for hurting themselves. And if we think about that, hurting themselves, not a crime against you or me as a person or a property, but they're hurting themselves. And to me, that's not a good use of resources. It's a health issue. And it's a lot cheaper to treat somebody who wants to help with their addiction and to educate people about the dangers of these drugs. But we'd have less deaths. We'd have less people getting ill if we made it legal, heavily regulated it, and took that approach. Well, that's my view.
Well, I, of course, tend to agree with you, and I am a fierce libertarian myself, but just to play devil's advocate for the sake of interesting conversation, many people would say, sure, it's true that drugs only in the immediate hurt the individual. Of course, it's a personal thing. A person ingests it. But, we live in somewhat of a quasi-welfare state, right? I mean, we have a lot of social services and government instituted organizations that take care of people. We don't live in a completely free, true capitalist society. We do in many respects, but there are these kind of social welfare networks in place that, taxpayers are funding. So in the event that we were to legalize drugs, and certainly some of the more severe ones that clearly debilitate people in very real and meaningful ways, the concern is that the taxpayers are going to ultimately end up paying for it in the form of increased trips to the emergency room or whatever other social services are in place. Maybe there's going to be more food shelters that the government is going to have to pay for. You can just imagine that a drug-infested society would result in a lot of bad things that at some level the government is going to have to step in and help solve with taxpayer money, right?
So great. I think you made a great counter argument. But let's consider this. If we're going to look at it objectively, so let's take the emotions out of it. I don't want my kid to be a heroin junkie, which could happen because we do have a drug-infested world.
Right.
Okay. What I would say is if we're going to say, okay, healthcare costs, societal costs, because we do have some socialism mixed in with our capitalism, we take care of people, and it's going to become expensive. Then let's look at what really drives those costs. Alcohol, by far the most dangerous drug out there, by far. And we tried making it illegal, and that didn't work. Also, sugar. So should we, and obesity. Should we limit people from making themselves obese by eating bad food, because that costs society a heck of a lot of money. And
I mean, these arguments might really only support tightening down on things that are doing harm, not necessarily legalizing things that will certainly do more harm, right?
Well, what I would say is this. Most people are going to say it's ridiculous to think we're going to go into such a nanny state that we already tried legalizing alcohol from 1920 to 1933, and that was a complete disaster. So if you hear me say, sure, I hear the argument on heroin and crack cocaine and powder cocaine and all that, which, not great. But so, alcohol, if you look at deaths, causes far more deaths than any other drug. And if you look at the societal costs, obesity costs a lot more. So if the argument against me on what I'm saying is societal costs, and I'd say, okay, open up to everything, and I think most reasonable people, by far the vast majority, would say, wait a minute, I live in a free country. If I want to go eat a Big Mac or go to Arby's, I should be able to do that. And quite frankly, do we not have freedom if I don't have the freedom to put anything I want into my own body? So I'm a freedom guy, and I think most people are as well.
Right.
And if we clear the jails of somebody who ingested something in their own body, we could actually open the jails for somebody who is drunk driving or driving under the influence, and actually put them in jail for a month or 2 or 3, because that's dangerous. That's putting your life at risk, my life at risk, my wife, my children. But if you're drinking in your house or you're taking heroin in your house, I don't know how that's hurting me.
So just to be clear, you're not necessarily advocating only for the legalization of cannabis, but for effectively all drugs. Is that accurate?
I get asked really about cannabis 95% of the time. When asked, I think that the whole drug war is a complete mistake, and the money that we have spent has been wasted.
Okay, very interesting. So you're not necessarily saying that we should legalize all drugs, in as much as perhaps we should either decriminalize them or, kind of have an understanding, even if it's
legalize and regulate it. So legalize and regulate it. No decriminalization, no games. If Abe wants to go out and buy cocaine, it will be highly regulated. And if you're using while driving, go to jail. If you do something stupid while under the influence of it, and you hurt somebody or you steal something, you go to jail. But at least you'll know what you're getting, because we lose a lot of people to heroin overdoses because they're getting junk and they get hot loads where it's, you don't know what you're putting in your arm, and I think a lot of people don't really care. They're going, well, it's a heroin junkie, but that's somebody's son, brother. There's smarter ways to take care of this, and if the person is not hurting you or anybody else in society, just themselves, then and by the way, a lot of people use cocaine recreationally, and they don't hurt themselves. I'm not advocating that, but I am advocating not taking them to jail and using jail resources. Treat it as a health situation, and I am saying not to criminalize, but legalize and regulate. The black market just doesn't work.
Well, first of all, let me say that I think it's very admirable to come out with such force and clarity in your position. A lot of people in the cannabis space, they kind of pussyfoot around the issue, but this is a very pure libertarian perspective, which I certainly agree with, and I think many of our listeners do as well. I had this thought while you were kind of speaking with such kind of passion and interest that, as going back to your previous job as a police officer, this could very well be my own biases, but you tend to think of the police officer as just kind of the generic man, and all he is a uniform and a badge, and there he is to just put people in jail, to arrest people. But listening to you speak, I think that really it kind of humanizes the profession, because it's so easy to focus on the penalty of being arrested, the iconic image of someone being handcuffed. But really what you're talking about is, providing safety to the public, which is what the police force is, of course, meant to do. The intentions are so much more pure and just than what one would see on the outside of arrests and other things. So I just wanted to say that I think it's a very interesting perspective, certainly for me.
Hey, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you saying that. What I would say is the TV show Cops does a disservice to the police.
Yeah.
I know it's exciting TV, and you see them doing foot chases and car chases and all that kind of stuff. But I will tell you, 90% of my job when I put on my vest and my badge and I went out there, when people don't know who to call, they call 911 and the police get sent. There's an electric line there, and we rush out there to make sure nobody gets killed.
Yep.
There is somebody being beaten, a child not being fed. There were so many times where I went out there and a woman jumps into my arms because she's being slapped around by her husband, and her neighbor calls and I come walking in and I'm Superman.
Right.
Or I'm carrying a child out there who's malnourished. I'm 28 years old. I've never had children, and I'm like, oh my God, I've got to put food in this boy, or this little girl. And I can't tell you how many times, Abe, that police officers themselves would stop at a Trader Joe's on the way to the station, reach into their own wallet with, never ask for any money back because they're trying to help this kid. That's why they took the job.
Uh-huh.
And it doesn't get reported. The only thing that gets reported is a bad shooting.
Right.
Or the Justice Department saying the Chicago police are out of control. It's like you've got thousands of police officers out there reaching into their pocket,
yep,
trying to help people day in and day out, and you just malign them all. And then you wonder why crime skyrockets and the police go, hey, I'll just handle 911 calls, and if you flag me down, but don't expect me to start pulling people over and trying to investigate and do Terry versus Ohio style. It's not going to do it. Mm-hmm. And it's a shame. So I appreciate it. I know there are a lot of police officers, when they hear what you said, will say thank you, because out here in Southern California, I've known police officers that dropped their badge and gun and dove into the ocean to help pull people out. That is not their job, but they don't want to watch somebody drown in front of them. And to me, it's like, how heroic. Yep. And then they get out, they go back, they put on a fresh uniform, and then half an hour later, they're out there back on the streets trying to help.
I think it's so important to be speaking about this, quite literally right now, because as you referenced in Chicago, there seems to be this kind of this zeitgeist of anti-police rhetoric and certainly sentiment. And in my own experience, just kind of being in this industry, this kind of anti-police talk really seems to be coming from the left. It's certainly not coming from the Republican Party. It's coming, and that's not to say that it's coming from Democrats per se, but certainly from strong subgroups of the Democratic Party, the more hardcore left. And the cannabis industry, as a function of its counterculture ethos, which I think spawned its movement, 50 years ago or whatever. But the cannabis industry is, I think, predominantly comprised of the left. Maybe not the hardcore entrepreneurs and investors and businessmen that are trying to make real money out of it, but just as a community, it feels very leftist. And you hear this kind of anti-police stuff. Frankly, I think a lot of white, anti-quote male, anti-privilege, anti-Israel, all this kind of stuff. And the marijuana industry is, I think, afflicted with this issue. What has your experience been with that?
Anyway, I sit on panels and I talk extensively about legalization, and I would agree with you. I've not seen my police friends so polarized. Uh-huh. I go to Facebook where I have many police friends, and I just see this. It's an anti-Obama, anti-this administration, where they feel like this administration doesn't care about the police and doesn't say, hey, it's wrong to resist arrest. The time to resist arrest is with your lawyer. Yep. To call the THC legal group. Not to make a police officer who doesn't know if you're armed, doesn't know if you're wanted for murder, doesn't know why you're acting the way you are, but makes the police officer feel very unsafe. And so I am watching this more of a left with the Black Lives Matter and some of those folks. And so when I go to speak about legalization, a lot of times there is cop bashing going on, and I'm saying, look, case in point now in Santa Ana, California, which is a large city in Orange County, California. Santa Ana is the only city in Orange County that has legalized dispensaries. And I am invested in one. And I talk, and there's a bit of a mistrust amongst the operators of the police. And I said, look, they want armed security. And I said, no, we're a legal business. Everybody here has been fingerprinted by the police department through the chief's office. So I said, if there's a problem, we have insurance like any other business. We will not have an armed security guard. In fact, we will not have an identifiable security person. We'll have somebody holding the door. And if we have any problems, we will call 911, and the police are going to come and help us because we're no different than a Trader Joe's or a bank now. And they found I'm right. The police do come. We had someone smash our window one night trying to break in. Police came right like they would any other business. They treat us fairly. Now, when it's sort of not legal or illegal, it's a mix like it is in the city of Los Angeles. There is a blatant mistrust because they don't know if the police are coming there to bust them, and they don't have that synergy. So I would say the interesting bedfellows that you shared, I wish more people that were more right-leaning would look at the cannabis space. Another interesting, the right-leaning folks feel that the Second Amendment is under siege.
Right.
Okay, and the left-leaning folks want less guns, but they want more weed. And the right-leaning folks want more guns and no weed. And it's like, and to me, I'm saying it's somewhat the same argument. We're talking about a nanny state. We're talking about freedom. And so that's where I try and remind my friends on the right and my friends on the left, it's like, look, there's a way to be responsible in both arguments. And you can come to the same conclusion on both arguments and actually all, come together on that. And we can have a safer society where you do have Second Amendment rights, but you have some restrictions. And you also can have marijuana with restrictions.
Yeah,
and I think that's what we're about here is freedom. And we shouldn't have a left-right on this because that's just creating mistrust amongst people with differing political views.
Yeah, absolutely. I recently wrote an article actually arguing for cannabis legalization under the substantive due process clause of the 14th Amendment. I'm not sure how familiar you are with that, but basically the due process clause says, from a procedural point of view, that if you want to take away someone's life, liberty, property, it must be done with due process. And of course, as a police officer, you know what that means. There are regulations. You can't be thrown in jail for anything. There have to be limits on for how long you can be in jail without a proper trial. What does a proper trial mean? So this is all procedural due process, and then the idea of substantive due process is that there are certain fundamental human rights, liberties, things that are not necessarily explicitly outlined in the Constitution, and yet we're still nevertheless intended to be a part of it. So, we just have this fundamental right, which I argued, to use cannabis, and in the same way that there's a fundamental right under the substantive due process clause for gay marriage and for other sorts of desegregation efforts that we saw, 60 years ago. So I think it's interesting and important to advocate as you do from this point of view. Don't ask whether or not we want to be using cannabis, but whether or not we think we should have the right to use it if we did want to use it.
So I like your approach. I think that's why you're a very good lawyer in this space. And so I like your argument very much. And at some point, the politicians in Washington, D.C. are going to have to look out the populace and go, over 60% of Americans would like this legalized.
Yeah.
What are we doing? Whose interests are we representing?
Right.
And your argument, I think, can easily help make that point.
Yeah.
So I agree.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's move away kind of from the abstract, theoretical world where we were just operating in and move into kind of some of the more day-to-day stuff that you're doing and that your group is doing. Tell us, what is it? What is your business all about, and how should people think about it?
So, so for the last 20 plus years, I have been looking worldwide for interesting investments, and where I think, for whatever reason, there is a capital dislocation, meaning money is not able to freely go into that market. Like, for instance, if you want to buy an apartment anywhere in the country, you can get easy money for loans. There's plenty of people who like to invest with you, and it's easy. So the pricing is pretty competitive out there.
Yeah.
And so, and at different points, I bought farmland in Georgia, or I bought apartments and mixed use in Berlin, or high-end condos in Shanghai, so I've run around and found interesting timing. So cannabis, because it's legal here in California, the police officers here there's no real state law to enforce when it comes to other than not following municipal code if you have a dispensary, or not having if you don't have a license, they could shut you down. So, but they're not fighting that drug war anymore. So it's basically legal in the state of California, but it still remains a Schedule I drug federally.
Right.
And so our last administration basically had the Cohn letter and has basically defunded through Rohrbacher or FAR. Mm-hmm. And so we have basically been operating in a great field, but people were on the sidelines going, well, let's see what happens with Prop 64. And so I started investing knowing, I think Prop 64 passes. It's a good time to invest. The valuations of what I'm investing in now, if all of a sudden capital could flow freely and loans could be made and people could bank, I think I would make 5 to 10x on my money.
Wow. Okay.
Which is massive.
Right.
And there's nothing else that I'm seeing out there that could do it. The risk is that the federal government, the risk was Prop 64 didn't pass, so the growth wouldn't be there. Well, it did pass. But as soon as it passed, that same night, Donald Trump was elected. And I think a lot of people were surprised. And that threw this unknown wrench into the mix. Investors don't like the unknown. And so money is not freely flowing.
Right.
So at least for right now, then he said Jeff Sessions is going to be his nominee for Attorney General. And so people don't know how he's going to run the DOJ if he is confirmed. Mm-hmm. And so just on purely business, if I said to you, Abe, this is a great time to put money in the space, you can get a huge return, but they can also shut it down, seize the assets, and game over. So it's highly risky, high reward. You just have to kind of say, what does your crystal ball say? And I've been quoted by every single investor that has written a check to invest in the funds. I have told them, do not invest what you cannot afford to lose all of, every penny. Mm. And all of my investors are high net worth individuals, very sophisticated, all across the country. So,
if I could just interrupt you for a moment, for all of our audience who isn't, totally sure what a fund does, would you mind just giving a brief rundown of what this type of services you're providing?
Sure. So basically, I identify an opportunity and I say, I think it's a good idea to invest and make a loan to a dispensary here in Southern California. It's legally licensed. And I say, hey, would you like to invest with me? I've got 6 other friends, they want to invest. So let's say it's a total of 10 of us. Mm-hmm. And it's a way where I will put together the fund, which pools our money for this investment. And you basically, if we're doing a loan, you're part of the company that we've just formed. However much money you put in is your percentage of the company.
Okay.
And so basically, if this company makes a lot of money because of its loans, and then we exercise warrants, so we now have ownership in this, like we have some warrants and options, you can become an owner of a dispensary. You're a lender to a dispensary. And so it's a way for you to invest into a space that you think is interesting, and they have funds for office buildings and buildings that have Home Depots and probably where your law office is. And so it's a good way for you to invest your money. The SEC doesn't make it simple, and so as a fund manager, I can only accept from people that are accredited investors. So someone just have to Google accredited investor, SEC, and you'll see the guidelines, and if that fits, you would be allowed to invest with somebody like me.
Got it. Wow. That was an excellent explanation. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
I think the way you described it really kind of hits the nail on the head and is a microcosm of what this industry is at large, which is that it is high risk and high reward. So certain investors who are more risk averse wouldn't necessarily be comfortable investing in cannabis. But, for investors who might have a little money to throw around and, as you said, are willing to lose all of it, cannabis is a wonderful opportunity.
Absolutely. And one thing that we're not talking about that, and I'm hoping that is being talked about, is that there's a lot of cannabis out there that does not get you high. It has no THC. It has only CBDs.
Right.
And so my own father was told to take Advil. So ibuprofen because he's 71 and he was a bodybuilder and he has a bad back and they can't operate. So I said, Dad, and my brother who's a doctor said, Dad, ibuprofen is very hard on your kidneys and your liver taken long term. So I went to a conference in Las Vegas and I bought some pills that were straight CBD, no THC. I was told by the scientist who used to work for Purdue Pharmaceuticals, think OxyContin. And she said, by the way, these CBDs touch the exact same pain receptors as OxyContin, but it doesn't have the same addictive qualities as opioids.
Wow.
It's not going to it won't get you high like OxyContin does. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to put it in the stores or recommend that the operators put it in the stores until I buy some. So I bought some. I took it home. My dad, very skeptical because he's heard reefer madness his whole life. Starts taking it. Guess what? He's ordering more on his own. Doesn't get him high at all, but he's finding relief. This is cannabis. It's not just Cheech and Chong and what people think. This is helping people. Furthermore, I sit on the board of a cancer charity in Redondo Beach that covers most of LA County. And there are people in pain, some dying, and they find relief only from cannabis, and that's after trying so many other things that this helps them get an appetite. This relieves pain, helps them sleep. This is not just to go and party. This is medicine. And if the government and the people out there that are listening to your show can get behind legalization, we're gonna see so many good breakthroughs. When we'll see big pharma come into it, which I don't see as a total negative. And we're going to. It's not just for partying. And lastly, I'll tell you, Dave, a number of my investors have never been in a dispensary. Did they use pot when they were younger in college, in high school? Undoubtedly, many did.
Right.
But I all of a sudden get a call from an investor in Texas that says, Kyle, I've been taking a lot of Ambien to sleep. Do they have marijuana that helps me sleep? And I go, they do. You just take like a little chocolate-covered blueberry with 5 milligrams of THC, and this will relax you, or 10. And within a couple hours, you'll want to just kind of relax and you'll go to sleep. It's not as strong as Ambien, but it will work. It'll do the trick. He goes, can you ship it to me? I go, I can't. He goes, well, it's illegal here in Texas. So it's just not worth it, man. I can't. I don't want to violate that law. I want to stay in California, but when you come and visit, we'll find a way to get you a card.
Right.
Because he has an address in California, so he could get a card. So, but it's interesting that I'm getting more and more inquiries about this from people that you might not expect.
In the last 2 weeks, the DEA took a major swipe at CBD and actually wrote it into the Schedule I classing of the Controlled Substance Act. And they specifically mentioned CBD in addition to the other. So it's just, people felt a very ominous and foreboding event ahead of the Trump presidency. I just want to kind of talk a little bit more about the types of companies that you work with, and
Sure.
some of the experiences you've had working with the startup community in the cannabis space.
Sure. So, because right now my investors and I are not touching the leaf, meaning we don't own a dispensary,
Uh-huh.
we don't own a grow facility. We may own real estate, but we're going to lease it out,
Uh-huh.
and we may loan money to your operating company, but we're not going to exercise any warrants on that company until we feel it's the right time to do it.
Mm.
So we're looking for folks. I won't invest unless a city or county, and I'm only in California,
Uh-huh.
explicitly makes it legal, so that anything I invest in, while I know it's federally illegal,
Uh-huh.
is legal in the municipality and this state of California. So that's requirement number one.
Okay.
Requirement number two is I have to feel comfortable bringing that person home to my wife and my children, because that's how I do business in real estate. If I don't have a good feeling, I'm not. If you're Mr. or Miss Secretive,
Uh-huh.
and I just get a bad vibe,
Uh-huh.
I'm not in. And if the last one is,
Wait, if I could stop you right there for all our listeners, I think that frankly is a very intuitive approach to doing things, and we all know what that means to have this gut feeling about something or someone, and here this space in particular seems to be ripe for more nefarious characters to be operating. So just for everybody out there listening, if you're a startup company or a new business, trust your intuition. That's really the message here, Kyle, right?
it's I can't tell you how many times it saved my life where those little hair, intuition, the hair on your neck,
Yep.
just something doesn't feel right, and you can't always identify it.
Mm.
In the housing market, which is highly regulated, where we own lots of apartments and manage many more,
Mm-hmm.
you can't do that. You can't just gut feel, because you have to basically go step by step and run credit and everything else. You can't just reject somebody from a gut feel.
Yeah.
But in this space here, I'm very. There's a lot of people that have a very high risk profile because they were willing to risk their freedom when that was a really, in this state, that could really happen and was happening.
Mm.
And so if you've been in the business a long time, a lot of these folks are very brave.
Uh-huh.
And I say, man, these are folks like Martin Luther King that just looked at jail as, I'm moving the ball forward, and if that's what happens, that's what happens. And there's other folks that are just like, I'm making money, I don't care.
Uh-huh.
And so, and I know that may seem like, what's the difference? But it's the way that when I meet somebody, how I feel.
Mm.
And so it's a risky enough venture that if I don't have that good personal connection, that personal feeling, I don't want to do it. What I would tell your listeners that I have found is there is a massive amount of arrogance in the space where people just say, hey, I've been growing in my grandfather's basement for years. I'm the best grower. I'm the best.
Yep.
And they've had some success, but they haven't been tested in a full market.
Uh-huh.
And that arrogance got crushed in Denver when 50% of the dispensaries that opened shut down, because it turned out you actually had to be able to market and retail.
Yep.
and have some skills. So if you're looking 5 years ahead and you're investing with somebody who just feels like, the arrogance is just dripping from them, it's like, you know what? You're going to learn the hard way, and if I've loaned you money or bought the real estate, I am too. And so I'm looking for people that are trying to see where things are going to be 5 years out, and also are open to people outside this industry that have good marketing experience. We're getting a lot of good qualified people from other industries, experts, to join our industry. And if I hear any of the, I don't need that.
Yeah.
Well, then you don't need me, because with me comes basically some consultants of people that are very good at advertising, very good at retail, and and the retail experience.
Yeah.
So that's, and same with growing. If you read the book Big Weed, which you probably have, it's the author's a tad bit self-serving, but it's a great lesson in how difficult the business was for him, because the so-called experts have been operating in small little cocoons. And this is about to become a multi-billion, it already is a multi-billion-dollar business, but it's going to become, I believe, a massive business with lots of competition. So you need best practices and best policies from the get-go if you really want to build something significant.
Wow. Okay. Excellent advice. Well, we're wrapping up here. What do you think? I mean, we just went through some very good kind of abstract ways of approaching the industry. How do you advise people, or what would you tell, a new guy in the industry? Let's say he's developing a special humidor for cannabis.
Yeah.
What kind of things should he know on a kind of very tactical level? What would be a 3 or 4 step kind of immediate checklist of things that he should be doing, right now, getting himself ready to enter the market?
So if I get asked this all the time, I was on the front page of the LA Times with my mug, right? Above the fold, I've been front page Orange County Register. So friends, family, people are like, hey, this looks like an exciting new space. This is going to be the green rush, the new .com.
Right.
And so how can I get in this? And what I would say is, number one, believe in yourself, because and know that, like any other business, you're not alone, which is okay.
Yeah.
But you're going to have to really stick to it. And when you get knocked down, you're going to have to keep getting up. Number two,
love that.
That's just basic business anywhere.
Yeah.
You will not be successful in business. You will not be successful in life as you can be if you don't have a dogged determination and a belief that you will be successful.
Yeah.
And number two, you need to go out there and you say, okay, I have this wonderful humidor idea. I think it'll work with cigars, but this thing is just perfect for somebody's cannabis supply. I would say go to some of the local dispensaries if you have them in your state. If not, maybe there's if you're in Texas and own dispensaries, there could be some coalitions of people trying to legalize, but they use cannabis. And go and ask them, what do you think? Try it out. Let me know. Get some feedback. Have an open mind, because this is a great time to get into the space. And when I hear people negative saying, I should have got it 2 years ago, okay, but you didn't. And this is going to grow massively in the United States. And I think once California, the 6th largest economy in the world, takes off, I think it grows worldwide. So this is your time to educate yourself. This is your time, and it's going to take, if you have another job, you're going to have to do it when you're off. You're going to have to do it on weekends. But you're going to have to go get to put the time in to educate yourself on, and I'm not saying go out and smoke weed or whatever else if that's not what you want to do. What I am saying is go learn the business and find those opportunities. And you might find the humidor is a bad idea, or what you're making, but you're going to learn something else that, hey, cake pops. I can make cake pops with cannabis. And that's the thing. Or I should go get a license. I should go to my city council and really work with them and make relationships and go get a dispensary license. And then if I'm getting close to that, I should go to other states like Colorado or California where they've had dispensaries for years, and then go and just say, hey, can I volunteer? Can I help out? I just need to learn. Can I pay you to teach me? And educate yourself. To treat that as a college education that you need to be successful. Knowledge is power.
Yeah. No, and I think undergirding all of these things is really this almost warrior ethos. Just kind of get after it. Start working hard, get passionate about it, get excited about it. Work your ass off. and that's what it takes, right? There are no shortcuts, and in this industry in particular, with all of its subtlety, nuance, and legal ambiguity, you really just need to persevere if you want to succeed.
Well, one more. Let me give you a plug.
Yeah.
Always, you cannot spend enough for a good lawyer and a good accountant. And when it comes to this space, there's a lot of newbies that want to say, "Oh, I've been a lawyer, and I can do cannabis," or "I'm a cannabis lawyer," yet they're just brand new. You want to have somebody that understands the laws, and Abe, I know you do. So you want to reach out and say, "Okay, I've got this idea. I've done a lot of research. Abe, I don't have a lot of money. What would a couple hours of your time? What would it cost me to have you review this idea? I need to get just kind of a legal opinion."
Yeah.
And that's, you don't want all of a sudden to have the cops knock at your door because you're like, shoot, if I'd only done this or been across the street, I wouldn't have this problem. Because Abe could have guided me. Yeah. So having good counsel, and I have good counsel out here that knows California specifically, Santa Ana specifically, and Santa Barbara specifically, because we have to be right.
There is no second chance in this industry.
Could be brutal, and you find yourself really in a bad spot, having to spend, not asking your attorney how much to review, but how much to help me with the criminal case against me.
Right. Wow. Well, look, this has been a tremendously interesting, informative, and at some points, in my opinion, exciting interview. We really appreciate having you on. How do people connect with you? How can they connect with your group, access you? What should people know?
Sure. We set up a company called Magu, M-A-G-U Capital. Magu is the Chinese goddess of longevity.
Okay.
So we thought it was pretty cool.
Clever.
And our website is magucapitalllc.com. And my email is Kyle, K-Y-L-E, at magucapitalllc.com.
Okay, so there you go. If you have any questions, concern, interests in the startup life, please reach out to Kyle. Well, this has been another interview with...
Hey, real quick.
Yeah.
Any legal questions, go to you, not me. They need to go to you.
Thanks, Kyle. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, we love that. This community is all about networking, people introducing each other, and kind of getting everyone involved. Okay, well, this was another podcast with THC Legal Group. Until next time.